What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And I'm Sarah.
And this is the Deep Dive. And we are excited to have Sarah on the podcast. We were talking a little earlier, and I realized that I don't think I've done like an official podcast with you yet. You have preached a couple times, but I think Dave has always been your co-host at that time. So this will be a family affair today.
Woohoo!
And I'm excited to get into it.
Me too.
All right, let's do it. All right, Sarah. So you got the opportunity to preach on Mother's Day, and I thought, me and Dave sometimes we have a little bit of a banter session up front, and I wanted to ask you a question.
Okay.
If I were to ask your mom, shout out Gigi, what a funny story is from your childhood about her parenting, or just a story of her being like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe Sarah did that," what would it be?
It is the story that is constantly brought up, and I am forever teased for because even in my elder age, I still do it. Where as a child, I did not like to get dressed in the morning and have only that outfit to wear for the whole day. So I would change all throughout the day. I would have my breakfast outfit and then my post-breakfast outfit, and then I'd want to change for lunch and dinner, and it would drive her absolutely insane. So it got to the point that the home we were living in, she actually put a lock on my closet, and she was the only one with the key. And so I would just stand in front of my closet and cry because I did not want to be in that one outfit for the whole day. And as an adult, I still struggle being in one outfit for the whole day.
I was wondering if that would change when you had to do your own laundry and all that stuff.
Nope, it does not.
You just have a lot of laundry to do.
I have a lot of laundry.
It's a never-ending cycle. I can imagine it. We got it at 4 people, and you're just doing it all for the same amount of people. So
yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
If I had to say one for me, I was thinking about it, and when I was younger, I just like to throw things. I don't know why. I was a baseball player maybe, and I threw stuff a lot. And my mom tells a story one time about me going out into the driveway. We had a gravel driveway, and I picked up rocks, and I just started throwing them. Well, after a while, I was like, I wonder how high I can throw it.
Oh, no.
So I would throw it up and watch it and be like, wow, that was pretty high. And there was this one time, famously, that I threw it up, I watched it, and it came down and smacked me right in the middle of the head.
David and Goliath style.
And my mom, the way my mom tells it, she's like, I was just sitting in the kitchen watching you going, he's not going to let that hit him, is he? And then she's like, it was like a slow motion train wreck. As it was just boom. And she's like, this one might be an idiot. So,
thank God we have Michelle.
Yes. Yeah. Thank God we got another one. That's going to keep us going. But no, it was a good time. And but I'm ready to kind of get into this. Your sermon was titled Elroy, the God Who Sees. And that was really kind of the overarching point of the whole thing that you kept coming back to is you are seen no matter where you're at, which I thought was awesome. I think a lot of traditional Mother's Day sermons kind of just do the, yay, your mom.
Yeah.
And you kind of hit that with some like, hey, if you're cool about this day, we're happy for you. We love you. We celebrate you. We're there. But I thought it was a cool step to acknowledge the places where maybe there was a little pain associated with. Yeah. And you started in the story of Hagar. So kind of just give us a refresher on Hagar. Kind of tell us, just for those who might not have watched, which if you haven't watched, you should totally go back to the Facebook, the YouTube, check out the service. It was a great sermon, but kind of give us a refresher.
So Hagar was the slave of Abram and Sarai, who eventually become Abraham and Sarah. Yep. And God had already previously promised all of the land that they lived in to Abraham's descendants. They just hadn't had said descendants yet, and they were getting pretty old. And Sarai was like, if God's not going to do it, I'm going to make it happen for myself.
Which normally leads to trouble.
It always leads to trouble.
Yep.
She was a pretty feisty lady because she told Abram at that time, like, God has not allowed this for me, so I'm going to do it myself. Which feels like really bold.
But honestly, like when you said that Sunday, I kind of made me think, it's like, yeah, I think there's times I've kind of done that, taking control, like, all right, God, well, if you're not going to, then let me do it. And then normally followed by a smack in the face somehow.
Apart.
Yep.
But Hagar just happened to be the innocent victim in all of this, who was then sent to sleep with Abram, became pregnant, and she was like, "Well, what am I supposed to do now?" Sarai didn't like the anger that Hagar had towards her and ended up mistreating her. So Hagar ran, which makes sense. Like I would want to run away as well.
Hmm.
And when she ran, she met an angel on the road who basically was like, "Hey, man, this kid you're gonna have, it's gonna be a handful, but it's gonna be
Yeah, what
okay."
was it? A donkey of a man or
Yeah,
something like
a
that?
wild donkey of
A
a man.
wild donkey of a man.
No, thank you.
All right.
And he's always going to be hostile towards people. Like, ooh. But the angel was like, "You're going to be okay. And I also want you to go back to where you just came from." But instead of Hagar being like, "Heck no," like in that moment, she knew that she had been seen by God. And she
Hmm.
knew that regardless of the fact that she didn't ask for this wasn't at all her intention or plan, God still saw what was there for her
Yeah.
and had a promise for her on the other side of that. Because the angel did promise her descendants beyond what she could count or imagine. Like, this is what we're giving to you. There's a promise. It's going to be difficult, but there's still a promise.
Yeah.
You're still seen. You're still safe. And Hagar went back and did exactly what was asked of her.
Yeah. I think one of the side things in the story too is that like I think the way you said it in your sermon was like, good luck, blessings are coming, like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to go through all this, but good luck. And it was just kind of, and maybe it's a question for us to talk about a little bit is, how do you have like, how do you keep the faith in God and still be patient and waiting? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I think sometimes we really get struck by current circumstances or where things might not feel great at a moment or whatever. What strategies maybe do you use or whatever to kind of hold faith there?
There is a verse in Psalms, and I heard a pastor preach on it, and David is like, "Why are you so downcast, O my soul?" Like, I think it's like, "Rejoice in the Lord," or "Find strength in the Lord." And the pastor was preaching about it, and he was like, "You get to tell your soul how to react.
Mm,
Like, you are the one that gets to say, we are going to be angry, or you're the one that gets to say, I'm going to trust the Lord."
yeah,
And so in those moments where you're like, nothing is good right now, even if that is a truth for your moment, the really large overarching truth is that regardless of what's happening in a moment, God is still good.
yeah,
And if God is still good, that tells me there's still good coming.
yeah,
So if I can speak that to my soul, like, this is the worst, but God is still really good. And I know that that is true. I don't just say it because it sounds nice.
yeah,
I fully believe that God is good,
yeah,
regardless of if a moment is good or not. That's when we can find that space of, even if this isn't good, God, you're still good enough.
yeah,
We're going to keep walking. Like, we're going to keep doing this. Even if it doesn't get easier, even if it doesn't bring joy, it doesn't make me happy, you're good. So there is good somewhere. We
yeah,
just have to keep going and looking for it.
yeah,
But that's my job to tell my soul, we believe that God is good enough. We believe that we can keep doing this. We believe it's going to be okay. We're going to do this. Like, we're going to keep going.
And I think that segues very well into the rest of your sermon because you spent a lot of time really talking to people where they were at.
Yeah.
You kind of you did specify. You said this isn't just a Mother's Day sermon. This is a sermon for everybody. I'm referencing mothers today because it's Mother's Day. You know what I mean? But like really looking at circumstances and where you're at and saying God sees you in those spaces
Mhm.
and he is good. You know what I mean? And to trust and to find that peace and that trust within that, I think is it's a skill,
Yeah.
because sometimes that takes a lot of like mental charisma or mental like capacity to kind of keep reminding yourself God is good. God is like because life just seems to happen in waves sometimes, like you'll be
Yeah.
good for a couple years and then three things back to back to back happen, and it's really easy to say that in that good time
Yeah.
of like God's good. Look, I mean, my stocks are going up, my family's healthy, all that stuff, and then something happens, and for me, like, mom went, got a lung transplant, stuff just started happening, and like life just I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the highs and lows, I guess, as they say. But as we were talking, or as you spoke on Sunday, you really brought up a lot of circumstances people find themselves in on Mother's Day, from somebody who's maybe lost a mom, or mentally lost a mom, somebody who's not been around, or isn't in the same capacity that they were before, or whatever. And you just looked at them. You just looked at the people in this space and you said, God sees you, and I love how you tied kind of that story of Hagar, because in the midst of the hardest thing she was probably going through, especially at that time,
Yeah.
like a lot of hard circumstances, God showed up and said, I see you,
Yeah.
and I think as if we can remember those things along the way, it helps us stay grounded in knowing God is with us. God loves us. I might not understand this. I might feel these hard things, but that doesn't mean God is any less with me.
Yeah.
And you're a youth pastor, so I know you understand these like mountaintop experiences. I think that we find ourselves in sometimes, and we kind of think that that's how our relationship with God should always be. But I think it's in these day to day circumstances where our faith is really ironed out.
Hmm.
You know, so. Um, but I guess I have a question, because it is hard work to go through. You mentioned grief a lot
Hmm.
in your sermon, of the grief of a lost parent, or the grief that maybe you don't enjoy motherhood as much as you thought you would, or you lost a child somewhere along the way. You know, how do you? What strategies, maybe if somebody's listening and they're like, "Yeah, I feel that." Like, what strategies would you give them to kind of start working through that?
Something that was important for me to learn is that grief isn't just with like physical death of people. We can grieve a lot of things in our life. Like if our life isn't meeting our expectations, that's something worth grieving.
Hmm.
You had something that didn't happen. It doesn't feel necessarily like grief, but that's exactly what it is. You still walk through those stages of, I'm really angry that this happened. I'm okay that this happened. Now I'm really sad that this happened. Now I'm back to being okay that this happened. And there's so much in life that we grieve. And when we realize that we can grieve ideas, we can grieve moments, we can grieve the loss of people in our lives, or just the loss of a relationship in our life, it frees us to actually have capacity to walk through that grief.
Mm.
And I think that a big thing with walking through grief is recognizing that you need to walk through it. The second thing is to recognize that you have to have people to walk with you through the stages of grief. Because we don't just walk linearly like through the stages of grief that are out there. They all like ping pong all over the place. So there are days that we're sad about it. There are days that we're angry. There are days that we're okay with it. There's days that you bargain and days that you want to pretend it never happened. And when you have people to walk through that with you that can just hear you out, whether that's a venting session or whether it's, hey, I need you to tell me if I'm crazy right now. This is what's happening.
Yep.
We need people to walk through that with us. And sometimes that's a friend, sometimes that's a family member, sometimes that's a therapist, and that's a really great place to start. For some of us, grief is what it is, and
Yep.
we can walk through it. For others of us, grief is too heavy and too hard, and we need somebody to walk us through that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with going to see a therapist. I love my therapist. I have really enjoyed is a strong word for that. I've appreciated the process of grief in the setting of therapy,
Yeah.
because there's so much more offered to me as someone who is just seeing me walk through this process than someone who knows everybody else in a circumstance who's walking through it, who is comparing where I'm at or saying that I need to be thinking of things a different way. It's someone who's just looking at me saying, from what I'm hearing of you, this is how you can help yourself
Yeah.
move forward, how we can walk.
Yep.
And like I said in my sermon, if you're not at a space where you're comfortable with therapy, that's not your jam, we do have the Stephen Ministry here, which they are not therapists by any means. They are not licensed therapists, but they are trained individuals who will walk with you through hard things in life. And if therapy is not a place that you feel comfortable going to yet, this might be a really great first step
Yep.
to get used to talking to someone, to get used to having someone check in on you. It might be all you need, or they might be your first step to something bigger.
Right.
But there's always people to help you walk through grief, because we cannot walk through it alone.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, we've said on the podcast a couple times, just, you know, therapy is not a scarlet letter by any means,
Yeah.
or something that's going to set you apart and be like, people, oh, this person's crazy. Um, I would say, and I think Sarah would probably agree, is it's honestly probably one of the bravest things you can do for yourself,
Yep.
because you're basically committing to walking through something hard that a lot of people will just try to repress, and then it comes out in ugly ways. So you taking those steps to get help that you might need is really a good thing,
Yeah.
and not something that should be ashamed. It's something that should be really treasured and honored. And you know, I know you said I don't enjoy it necessarily, but in some ways, it's still one of those like you're helping yourself. You
Yes.
know, it's almost like a an emotional going to the gym to kind of work through some of those harder things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's nothing but good. But I also heard somebody explain grief kind of like a ball that's constantly pinging in a box,
Yeah.
and that there's like this target or this button that if it hits, grief just starts. It's like something you might not hit for years and years and years, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just pops in. And you're like,
Yep.
what the heck just happened? Nothing triggered this, but it's just that random box that kind of pings and hits. And you know, grief is a complicated thing to walk through.
It's weird.
It
It's
is
just
weird.
weird.
It is, but it is important to walk through it too, because for us, I think we're stronger than we know we are. So to be able to find those places of things that can give us that strength to continue and to be our healthiest version of ourselves going forward. But I also think like finding those alternate people, those good friends that you can just say, hey, this is that vent session.
Yep.
I don't need you to give me advice. I just need you to hear me out, give me a hug, and let me cry for a second. Those are invaluable people. And I know I've been a youth group where you shared about those friends, um, to them to let them know who those people were and how they
Yeah.
impacted your life. And I think that's really important for kids to understand. But also, is if you don't have those friends, like seek out those that is something to pray for,
Yeah.
because those people are invaluable in life. And a part of it's sometimes you got to get yourself into some community, whether that's at church, whether that's in a hobby you enjoy or whatever, to find those people. Some are just you're lucky that you're still in the area you might have grown up in and they're there, or you had a good experience when on retreat with. Just take advantage of those and find those people.
Yeah.
That is something to work hard to do.
Yeah.
Um, you know, you mentioned that we don't have to bear our burdens alone. And I think that's what we're really hitting at with this, is that we don't have to walk through life alone. You don't have
Right.
to deal with whatever emotion you're feeling alone, whether it's on Mother's Day or any other day that ends in a Y. They all do. Just
I got
okay, okay,
it.
okay, okay. You know what I mean? Like having that space and finding community is probably the biggest thing the church can do
Yeah.
for its community alone, is to create space. And I know that's something we work at. That's why we do these Cinco de Mayo lunches. That's why we do our lunches, dinner groups at times. You know what I mean? Like this young families small group that we're starting up, or grow group. Like these are places we're trying to build community, so people have people to walk through life with.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not about having an attendance number or being able to sell, oh, we got 15 people in this group. It's about community coming together and meeting people in life where they're at.
Yeah. And I
So
think it's important for us to realize that we were never meant to do this by ourselves.
yes.
If you look at the life of Jesus, he was never by himself. He like held off in the desert for 40 days because he needed to. But he had his people, he
Yep.
had his family, and when it was time for his ministry, he had his
Yep.
disciples. He always had people with him and around him, because even as the savior of the world, he needed people to do it with him.
Yep.
He needed people in the Garden of Gethsemane just to be present. Even though they weren't in the exact same space, they were there with him. Community was meant for all of us.
Yep.
There's not one of us that's like, well, I'm good enough to do it by myself. You don't have to be.
Yep.
You really don't. And you were never meant to be.
Right.
We were meant to do it all together.
And don't let your introvertedness or your extrovertedness decipher whether you are should or should not be in community. Because again, it's a recharge way more so than a matter of like, oh, I can't be around people. You can be around people. It might be one person for somebody and 15 for somebody else, but finding that space of community, whether it's two or three really good friends and that's it, or 10 to 12 people in a group. I think people do it different ways. Like I would say I'm more of like I just need my 3 or 4 people,
Yeah.
like that I can really love and pour into and all that stuff. And some people I would look at and be like, I want all of the people. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm going to get little bits from every person. And it's like, oh, I don't want to share everything about myself to everybody, like,
Yeah.
so it's just different for different people.
But
Uh,
as an extrovert,
yes.
I love my introverted humans, and I will seek out my introverted humans because I know they need a place to come in and belong.
Yeah.
And I know I'm not the only extrovert that does that.
No.
So for our introverted friends, like, it's okay to go and show up because we're going to find you
Yeah.
in the kindest, least scary way
I
possible.
don't know. That's not a pretty scary. We will
We will
find you.
come and love you into a friendship very easily.
Yeah. And to kind of maybe wrap this up, you really kind of hit into a space where you were talking about your own personal story of being 33, and some of your dreams haven't come to fruition the way you imagine them, and you made this statement, holding the death of a dream simultaneously with deep gratitude. And you know my story, Sarah, but for those of you that don't, is I can relate to that exceptionally well because I was 34 when I met Rachel. I was 35 when we got married. Like I had been in that space for a long time. And to be transparent is like Rachel was my last shot. Like I had already been like, this was I'm not going to do it after this, because I had gotten to a space in my life where I was like, you know what, I can do life without this. Like, I had settled in that,
Mhm.
not that I didn't want it any less, but I had gotten to a space where I was like, okay, God, this is what you got for me. We're going to make the best of it. But this deep gratitude in the middle of that hardship, I want you to speak to it for your life. And then, um, you know, like where do you find your well of gratitude from the most of?
A few years ago, I looked at a friend of mine and I was like, I don't understand what I've done wrong, that I don't get what I want here.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't messed up. I've done the best I could. Like, I really just, I'm completely not seeing what it is that I did that led me to not get what I want, which sounds super petty, but we all deeply feel that at some point in
I,
time.
I was about to say,
Very much so.
I could say like, the spaces where you're watching some friends get married a second time, or like, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
or like you watch them cheat or do something really wrong, and you're like I'm living a good
Or you
life,
see
man.
these stories of people getting out of prison who get to be married too, and you're like, you didn't even meet each other yet, and it
Yep.
happened for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she looked at me and she was like, you have spent so much time only focused on what you want that you are missing all that you have been given. And that changed my perspective because at first I was like, I haven't been given anything. Meh, 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 meh. And then I stopped and realized, like, oh, I've actually been given a lot.
Yeah.
And I am wasting so much time trying to strive to find a husband, trying to find a way that I can have children, and trying to find a way to do all these things I want. But my gosh, I have such a good life.
Yeah.
And why in the world am I spinning my wheels on something that I can ask God for and trust that He's going to give to me when it is time for me to have it?
Yep.
But if that is my only focus and that is my only intention, not only am I taking away from the joy of my life because I don't see what's right in front of me, but how dare I say what I want is more important than the spaces you have given me to bless somebody else in?
Yeah.
The spaces that I need to come into and pour into other people. because God created each of us not just for ourselves and our lives, but for other people as well.
Yeah.
And how dare I come across and say, well, I didn't get what I want, so I'm not going to do what you asked me for anybody else.
Yeah.
I would just be taking so much from other people, and that's so unfair. And that shift of perspective to realize that I actually have a really good life
Yeah.
that's really full and really rich. And I get, like I said on Sunday, I get to love all of these kids here in the youth group. I get to pour deeply into my nieces. Like, I have such a beautiful opportunity to do so much good in the time that I have in this world. And I was wasting it because I didn't have what I wanted.
Yeah.
And while that's okay for me to be sad about, that's not my whole focus anymore. Is
Yeah.
it something that I ask for and pray for 1,000%? And there are days where I'm like, just really annoyed that I don't have it. But the side of me that is deeply grateful weighs much heavier now, where
Yeah.
I'm like, there's so much good here, and there's so much good to be done here. My focus has to shift
Yeah.
because I would be missing all of it.
Yeah. And that's such a powerful way to look at it, because I can say in my experience that it's hard to look outside of your current circumstance, but it's also so uplifting when you finally break that like mental barrier and go, who can I impact?
Yeah.
How can I continue to give? Because people would always say about me, and I would say this about you, is there's just a lot of love to give inside of you,
Yeah.
and I needed an outlet to give that love,
Yeah.
like and it became youth ministry, like, and I know that's part of what you're in now. You also been in the foster care world, so and you spoke a little bit of that Sunday of how you've been able to love those people very fiercely and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But like it just opened. It's like I'm still supposed to give my love.
Yeah.
Like I'm not supposed to reserve part of who I am to just hold on to because somebody might show up. Like it's not a endless, or it's not a it is an endless well. You know what I mean? Like it's not a finite amount, like a bottle of water where eventually it's gone. It's like God continues to build that love inside of us and gives us more to continue to pour out.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't, for the record, that doesn't mean you can't take time for yourself, because you should, to refill and stuff like that, to give more. But like I have never run out of the love.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's something I see in you especially. I see the way you care and you love and how that comes out. And I want to say, God sees you, but other people do as well,
Thank you.
and really deeply appreciate it. The nieces you talk about are my stepdaughters, and I get to see Camp Auntie Sarah's running, and I get to see the random face mask you'll bring just to have a little spa time with them, and the times that you're out there being jumped around on a trampoline or something like that, just to create experience and stuff like that. And that is so meaningful for them, but also the way you give to youth, to your friends, to my wife Rachel. Like, you are taking advantage of what's around you, and I really appreciate that. But I think it's also a witness to those people around you. Is that this isn't just something you say for a sermon; it's something you live out. And I know it's hard, and I do, and I've been there, I've done that, and I would say, I don't know what God's plan is for you or for anybody out there listening who might feel like they're in a situation, but God is still good.
Yeah.
And like I said, at the time where I was basically giving up on it is when God brought it. And that might not be your story, but I do trust that God's got something huge for you. Do you know what I mean? And that you're going to get to live out your dream. I believe that wholeheartedly. But you kind of ended it with this kind of section of the sermon with this statement, and I just thought it was so good that I had to bring it back up. It's, don't miss what God has for you today, thinking about tomorrow. And like, that is something we all need to take and just grab onto. Like, that should be one of those little cat posters or whatever that you buy and put on your wall,
Poster.
like, or on a sticky note on your
Yes.
mirror, because that is so true.
Yeah.
is like each day, like, and I'm a person who thinks long way ahead, and sometimes I know I miss an easy opportunity right in front of me to just either love on somebody or even playing with the kids sometimes or what, like, sometimes it's just I'm thinking so far ahead.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's my need to control. I don't know if it's a lack of trust sometimes, but I just do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I heard somebody explain it as like a safari. Like if you ever gone on one of those safaris, sometimes like you look around and you're like, wow, look at um, these animals coming up to this car. Like they're so cool, they're so majestic, all that stuff. But you don't look up and see the whole, Lion King sunset happening in front of you, the
Yeah.
whole beauty that God has for you when you're just so focused on either something so far or something so close. You know what I mean? Does it
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah.
So I want to leave off people with that as well. Is just remember this: don't miss what God has for you today, thinking about tomorrow. And thank you for bringing that because I just feel like that's so important.
Yeah.
Um, but we are kind of getting to the time we kind of need to wrap up here, Sarah. Is there anything last minute that you would like to add here or anything that you would like to say?
Oh, geez. I think
Put
that
you on the
you
spot.
ended it really well, though, is just to make sure that you're focusing on what you have today and not just what you want for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's okay to dream for tomorrow. As an Enneagram 7, I love dreaming about tomorrow and all the fun things that it holds. But I have to bring myself back to a place where I'm like, whoop, who are we intended to pour into at this moment?
Yeah.
What is my purpose in today? Because every day holds something. Even if your purpose is staying in bed and watching Netflix for a day, there's some good to be had there. There's always a purpose in a day.
Yeah.
And we don't want to miss that purpose because we are just waiting for what's coming down the line
Yep.
or trying to make something else happen coming down the line. You can do both
Yep.
at the same time, but don't miss one just because you're waiting for the next.
Yeah. And again, it's okay to take those spaces because the purpose of the day might be to feel what you need to feel
Yeah.
and recognize the space you're in and do with that what you need to do. Like that can be the purpose of your day. We're not saying necessarily you have to go, feed people every day or you have to go hang out with friends every waking moment or whatever. Like, what you need in each day. And it's don't waste days worrying about the next one. Just
Yeah.
enjoy and take in whatever you need to take in that day.
Yeah.
So, well, Sarah, this has been fun. It reminds me that we need to really think about that ice cream flavor podcast that we've been talking about.
Yes.
Where we review ice cream flavors
Yes.
just for fun.
Ice cream.
Yeah. But for those of you watching, thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have any thoughts, questions, things you'd like to add to the conversation, you know where to drop those. You'll see this pop up on your Facebook. You can either drop it in the comments there, or you can go over to the YouTube and drop it in there. We'd love to continue to have some conversation around this because I think it's something that meets everybody where they're at. And not just mothers, not just fathers, brothers, sisters, all those people. These are spaces that we need to learn from. And without further ado, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, guys.